Hey friend, it's time for another edition of Transplant Helper Rewind. Today's video you're going to be watching really goes back to about 2 years ago when I'm giving you basically 5 things you need to be avoiding at all costs. In the past, this is one of my more popular videos. I went back and looked at it. I decided it was pretty useful, so go ahead and check it out. 5 things we should be avoiding post-transplant at all costs. Stay tuned. Hey folks, welcome to Transplant Helper. My name is Jim Merle. Oftentimes when I'm sitting down in a fresh transplant patient's room, someone who's new to this whole world, I'm asked a lot of questions, and many times those questions surround the things that we cannot do, things that we need to avoid, things that we need to steer clear of post-transplant. I'm always happy to answer those questions, even though some people might see that as more negative. Those are things we really need to know and understand. So today I want to enumerate 5 of those things that I think are very, very important to living the transplant life, especially to living that life successfully and happily and healthy and all of that as we go forward living this life. Now, with that said, I want to go through this number of things, this list of 5, from what I would consider as the least important to the most important. So I hope that you'll stay tuned to the very end as I get down to the last of these 5 and make sure that you understand it and really understand how serious it is. Because I'll assure you the 5th one here is oftentimes overlooked or blown off as no big deal, but it really is. So with that said, let's start with number 1. Number 1, you're oftentimes warned to avoid sun exposure, and that is being overly exposed to the sun. Certainly there's nothing wrong with this, stepping outside the house, going from here to there and place to place, being exposed to the sun to an extent. As a matter of fact, sun exposure to an extent is good for us. There are certain vitamins like vitamin D, calcium, those type vitamins, certain hormones that are triggered in our bodies just by being out in the sun. So it's important as post-transplant patients that we're exposed to the sun. That helps to avoid situations like certain kinds of depression, and just all sort of health situations are avoided by being out in the sun to an extent. However, as you've probably already been warned, overexposure to the sun is a bad thing too. Tanning beds, going out and purposefully laying out in the sun, those kind of things today post-transplant for you are now a no-no. And I hate to say that because some people enjoy that. They get a lot of peace, a lot of good feelings about looking a certain way, but that's not nearly as important anymore post-transplant. So whenever you go out in the sun, as you've probably already been warned, you really need to avoid those peak hours. Basically in the southeastern United States, at least for us, that's between about 10 and 2. And don't be fooled by 70, 75 degree temperatures if you're experiencing that or lower, because oftentimes the sun's rays are coming through even in a more severe sense during those times. As a matter of fact, the worst sunburn I've ever had in my life was basically just sitting outside when it was like 72, 73 degrees. So it's a big deal. Now, when you go outside, try to avoid the peak times and then cover up. Wearing long sleeves, wearing clothing that covers your head like a hat, wearing something that covers your neck if possible, a collared shirt, those types of things help. But in the bare minimum, we should always be wearing some sort of sunscreen. Now, if you're a guy like I am, I understand. You don't want to go around smelling like the Bahama Mama all the time or Panama Jack. You don't want that. So what do you do about it? Well, my dermatologist recommended something to me I wasn't aware of, and that is to go down to the local Walmart or your 5 and dime drugstore, whatever it is, and pick up a little product about like this. Now, I'm not endorsing this at all. As a matter of fact, I can't endorse it because I don't even know how to say it. I think it's Nivea, but it's Nivea Men, and it's actually a protective lotion or a sunscreen for men. Now, it meets the minimum requirements for sunscreen post-transplant, and that is that SPF 15 mark. Now, I suppose there are times when we know we're going to be out for longer periods of time when something much stronger is needed, but basically on your skin, on your face, on your hands, your arms, your neck, that sort of thing, and SPF 15 more times than not at least will be a buffer, if you will, to those times when you're going to be out. So number 1, avoid being overly exposed to the sun. Number 2, and I don't think this is more important or least, but I do have to put them in some sort of an order. Number 2, avoid being around sick people. Now, that's already a given, right? You understand you're immunosuppressed. Your immune system is not what it once was. You're not going to be able to fight off the bacteria, the viruses, the colds, the flus, and all of these things like you probably once did. So we really, really need to avoid being around sick people. I've already dedicated at least 2 episodes prior to this. One called Hey Sick Guy, which was pretty popular. Another being called How to Avoid Infection Post-Transplant. Those 2 episodes you can go back and look at. I'll link to here in the corner or down below, something like that. Go back and look at those. But the basic gist of both of them is just to stay away from people who are sick. Stay out of environments where sick people are, especially during the peak seasons for colds and flus and such as that. And while you're there in those situations, if you can't altogether avoid them, be sure that you're washing your hands. I would include in that your face, all around your mouth, your nose, your eyes, whatever it is, washing them thoroughly. And then in the case of your hands, using hand sanitizers on top of that. Now, you may be against hand sanitizers. That's your opinion, not mine. But, doing all that you can. And then during certain periods of time, if you feel like it's necessary, I have no problem putting on that mask, the one that we wore right after transplant, I hope. Put on the mask. Don't be afraid to do that. Don't allow anyone to give you those funny looks because, hey, you like life like I do, so I think you'd be willing to do that. So number 2, avoid sick people. That's a given, but nonetheless, I have to bring it up. Number 3, avoid undercooked foods, or sometimes in some cases raw foods. Now, I'm not a sushi eater, but I did have someone the other day ask me, can I eat sushi? Basically, the answer is no, you can't. You cannot eat sushi and oysters and other things that are going to be completely raw, especially in the seafood world. In addition to that, when it comes to your meat products, and it doesn't matter whether it's pork or chicken or beef or whatever, going for that rare now is not the best idea. Somebody says, well, I can't eat a well done. It's like eating shoe leather. I can't take it. Well, really, you had better take it, because we need to avoid the extra bacteria and such that's remaining on that undercooked or even sometimes raw meat. And I want to add to that something you may have already known about, but something you really, really need to be aware of, and that is also avoid undercooked eggs, for example. Eggs. Why is that? Well, again, it's a bacteria type thing. That is, you need to have your eggs, whether you like it or not, cooked completely through. Both the yolk and the white. Both of the sides need to be cooked completely through. Now, that's not the way I like my eggs, especially the good old country fried egg. I don't like it that way. I want my yolk runny, but the truth is that's too dangerous to fool with right now, to be honest about it. So avoid that type of thing. In addition to that, avoid certain dairy products, such as milks that are not pasteurized. Whether you like that or not, we have to avoid that sometimes, because that's just all about safety. So in the third place, avoid undercooked foods, certain products, and such as that. Just make sure you cook your food. Next, and I think this one is another big one, if you will. Sometimes I see completely overlooked or disregarded, and that is avoid, number 4, avoid self-prescribed medications. Now, your doctors may put some restrictions or limitations on over-the-counter pain medicines. They may tell you to take Tylenol, but don't take ibuprofen, don't take Advil, don't take Motrin. I don't know exactly what they're going to say to you, because every transplant is going to be different. For heart patients, that is the case. But if you're a kidney patient, I don't know if that's going to be true or not, but I do know this. We don't need to be sitting around the house taking whatever we want over the counter. Certain allergy medicines, for example, can really cause some problems with our transplant meds. In addition to that, one thing I did not realize in the beginning is that certain vitamins or certain supplements. Now, I know that the doctors are going to prescribe some of those, and we need to take those, and we need to ask for recommendations on others, but don't just jump out there and decide, you know what, I got a problem with this, so I'm going to go take this vitamin because I heard it was good for it. Bad idea. Certain vitamins out there that you can get hold to, for example, vitamin E is one. Vitamin E can really wreak havoc on your body if you're on some kind of little bit of a blood thinner still, some of that warfarin or I forget the other name for that anyway, but some blood thinners really wreak havoc on that. Other medications affect your blood sugars, and on it goes. You don't need those adverse reactions or counteractions to your medication, so do not prescribed medications. That was number 4. Now, number 5 is one that I have actually seen a lot of controversy over, a lot of arguing over, and that is when they told you to avoid stagnant water. You know, things like creeks and ponds and puddles and water in ditches, or, you know, whatever it is. The old bird bath out behind grandma's house that was never dumped out. I don't know, you know, just stagnant water, avoiding that altogether. As a matter of fact, from what I've been told and actually learned through kind of researching this more deeply, that basically the only water there is that's kind of relatively safe to just be around in general is probably going to be seawater. So the oceans, the gulfs, that sort of thing. And even then, there are times when the bacteria levels are high, at least in the Gulf where we're nearby in the South. That's not even a good idea. But avoiding stagnant ponds and rivers and such like that. Now, what the controversy comes in is some people, they don't want to hear that. You know, they want to go to the public pool. They want to visit the pool at the hotel or even their pool at home. And I'm not saying your pool's not taken care of, but, you know, things happen there. They want to go in those situations regardless of what they've been told. And generally speaking, I've heard people say things like, well, I've been doing that for so many years and it hadn't hurt me. Look, I caught something a few years ago. You can research this on your own, called Cryptococcus. Now, that's a kind of a fungus of the lung, that sort of thing. I caught that a few years ago from basically a humidifier in a child's bedroom that wasn't as clean as it needed to be. Bad stuff. Over 2 weeks in the hospital, over a year of being treated by the infectious disease doctors at my transplant center with, you know, huge doses of oral antibiotics. And even then, they said I was one of the luckiest people they had ever seen, that it didn't go from my lungs to my brain, which is the next place that Cryptococcus could have been, and it could be deadly. But it was caught early and it was treated aggressively. And after a whole year, I managed to beat it. So avoid those situations. That same thing could be caught from, you know, ponds and rivers and streams, any stagnant area. And it's not a matter of you getting in the water to swim and you know, slurping that water up. It's a matter of the vapor. It's a matter of the spores and the molds and the bacteria and all that's around those areas. That's what you don't need to be around. Now, again, there are many more I could name here, but these are basically the 5. Number 1, avoid too much sun exposure. Number 2, avoid sick people. Number 3, avoid undercooked foods. Number 4, avoid self-prescribed medicines. And number 5, avoid stagnant water. I appreciate you being with me today on the Transplant Helper. If you're not already subscribed to this channel, how about go ahead and hit that subscribe button beneath the video now, and even hit the bell notification right next to it, because all my hope is that I can continue to advocate, educate, and motivate you as a transplant patient. But until next time, stay stronger, friends.